My name is Tony Townsend. I was 33 years old on the day a room full of strangers finally heard a truth my own mother had spent her whole life trying to bury. But to understand that day, you have to go back 5 years earlier, to a Thanksgiving when I was 28, sitting on a thin couch in a one-room apartment in Stillwater, Minnesota. Outside, the first November snow was drifting past a window. My phone had one new voicemail, 41 seconds long. My mother's voice was flat, like she was reading from a form. She said, "Don't come this year, Tony. Your sister doesn't want any trouble." No explanation, no apology, just the sound of the call ending and the quiet of the snow pressing against the glass. I put on my coat and left. What happened at a small restaurant that night and what my parents witnessed 5 years later at my wedding is the story I want to tell you. To understand any of it, you first have to understand the Townsend family. There were 2 daughters. There was Shelby, 3 years younger than me, who cried at everything, bad grades, job interviews, parking tickets, and who found someone to comfort her every single time. And then there was me. I was the one who filed the insurance paperwork when my dad hit his car. I was the one who drove 90 minutes each way to sit with our grandmother, Grandma Jo, when her memory started slipping away. Shelby said she couldn't handle seeing her like that, so I went instead every week without complaint. I did Shelby's taxes for 3 years in a row, then my parents' taxes, and my uncle's, because I had passed my CPA exam, and everyone decided that made my job. I was the person you called at 11 at night when a pipe burst, but not the person you called just to say happy birthday. I told myself for a long time that being needed was the same as being loved. I thought the silence after I fixed something was its own kind of thank you. I was wrong about both of those things, but the belief had grown into me like a second skin, and I wore it for years without questioning it. My mother, Dana, had a phrase she used whenever I said something too direct or too honest. She would tilt her head, press her lips together, and say, "Not now." 2 words that felt like a small cage closing. My father, Greg, had his own approach. A cleared throat, a look at my mother, and an immediate change of subject. If silence were a person, it would have been my dad. And Shelby had understood very early that tears got her what she wanted, so she used them freely and often. Every family has someone who manages the facts and someone who manages the story. I manage the facts and the numbers. My mother and sister managed the story. The story they told was that I was the difficult one. The one person who was different was Grandma Jo. Josephine Townsend was 81 when she died, barely 5 feet tall, with hands that felt like warm sandpaper. She taught me how to manage money in 4th grade and how to make her wild rice hot dish. Cream of mushroom soup, crushed buttery crackers on top, in 5th. Every Sunday, I drove 40 minutes to her house, and we stood together at her kitchen counter. She kept her recipes in a small wooden box, the cards yellow with age and covered in her looping handwriting. The hot dish recipe was always on top because we made it so often. One afternoon while she was stirring, she told me without any particular drama, "Antonia, this box is for you. Shelby doesn't cook, and your mother never asked for it." She said the way you'd state a fact about the weather. Grandma Jo died on a Tuesday in March 2020. By Thursday, Shelby had already put the recipe box in the trunk of her car. I found out at the lunch after the funeral. I asked Shelby about it calmly, and I genuinely was calm, but her face twisted, and she announced loudly enough for the whole room to hear that she couldn't believe I was fighting over a dead woman's things while she was grieving. My mother heard it from across the room. My Uncle Ray guided me toward the door by the shoulder, as though I were the one making a scene. That was the day the word drama got attached to my name permanently. 3 weeks later, I found out Shelby had sold the box and every recipe card inside it at a yard sale for $12. By the time I learned the truth, there was nothing left to do about it. After the funeral, the family story reset to its usual version. Shelby cried, my mother comforted her, and my father changed the subject. The story that circulated at holiday dinners was that I had attacked Shelby at the funeral. Not that we had a conversation, but that I had attacked her. My cousin Renee, the only one who still talked to me honestly, whispered to me later that she had seen exactly what happened. But she also said, "You know how your mom is." And I did know. My mother was 60 years old and had survived her own painful childhood by making everything look perfect on the outside. She had grown up being the one people picked on, and she had learned to go invisible to stay safe. When she had her own family, she built the same system. Any disagreement felt to her like an infection that could spread, and her solution was to make the truth teller go quiet. It wasn't that she was purely cruel. She was frightened. Shelby's constant need made my mother feel essential and loved. My competence made her feel unnecessary. So she protected the daughter who needed her and treated the strength of the other daughter as a kind of threat. I only fully understood this years later. At the time, I just understood the arithmetic. In my family, telling the truth had a cost, and that bill always came to me. Before the recipe box, before the funeral, there had already been a divorce. I was 26 when I left Kyle. On paper, he was everything my family approved of. Steady job, clean truck, polite to my father. But when we were alone, he was like a stone wall. We never argued, but we also never talked about anything real. I would come home after 12 hours of work, and he would be at his gaming console with headphones on, barely lifting a hand to wave. One couple's counseling session. Then he canceled our date nights one by one. I finally told him plainly that it wasn't working. He shrugged. That shrug was a summary of our entire marriage. The divorce was quiet and fast. My family made it loud and slow. My mother told everyone that Kyle had been such a nice boy and that she didn't know what I had expected. My father shook his head. Shelby posted a photo of herself at a bar with my ex-husband 2 weeks after the papers were signed and captioned it, "Family is family." She had never once posted a photo with me. So by the time that voicemail arrived 4 years later, the case against me was already built and closed. I was Tony who fought over things, Tony who couldn't keep a husband, Tony who ruined the holidays. My mother didn't need to explain her 41-second message. The wall had been under construction for years. All she had to do was say the word drama, and it was finished. On the night of that Thanksgiving, I sat on my couch for exactly 11 minutes. I thought about every holiday I had contributed to, the ones I had hosted, the ones I had cooked for, the time I had driven through bad weather to help when my mother had surgery, the year I showed up with a whole turkey because Shelby had forgotten to thaw hers. After 11 minutes, I put on my coat and drove to a place called Brennan's Supper Club, a wood-paneled old restaurant with a neon sign that had been burning since the 80s. The parking lot was full of families arriving together, breath visible in the cold air. The hostess sat me at a small table in the back, a table for one. I ordered a drink and tried not to look at the large table beside me, which held a grandmother, a mother, a father, and 2 children. There was one empty chair at the table, set with a plate and silverware, but no one sitting in it. I later learned the chair was for Gus, the grandmother's husband, who had died 2 years earlier. They set a place for him at every meal. The grandmother was Ruth Halverson. She told me later that she had noticed the way I was gripping my menu with both hands, like I might float away if I let go. She leaned over and said simply, "Bring your plate. This table has room." I almost declined. My family had trained me to say the polite thing, to insist I was fine and didn't want to be a bother. But Ruth was already moving a water glass to make space, and her daughter Bridget was pulling out the chair. So I picked up my plate and sat down with strangers. Ruth was a retired teacher, direct and warm in equal measure. Her son-in-law, Pete, was a plumber. Bridget worked as a counselor. They didn't ask why I was eating alone on Thanksgiving. They just made room. When the food arrived, Ruth had ordered the wild rice hot dish. The smell hit me the moment the plate was set down, and before I could stop myself, I was crying. Ruth asked if I was okay. I wasn't, but I couldn't explain that a smell had just reached through the years and handed me back something my sister had sold for $12. I went home that night with Ruth's phone number in my pocket and a feeling I hadn't recognized in a long time. Ruth texted me the following Sunday and told me to come for dinner. She said to bring nothing and meant it. In my family, you always had to earn your presence, cook something, fix something, solve something. I brought a bottle of wine anyway because I didn't know how to show up empty-handed. Ruth took it without comment and told me to sit down. Her house was small and smelled like good food, and her family treated me like I was simply a person, not a problem to manage. For weeks after that, I kept trying to pay for my seat, bringing things, fixing her shelves, making myself useful in ways nobody had asked for. Finally, Ruth stopped me at the door and said, "Tony, you keep bringing your resume to my kitchen. You don't earn a seat here. You just show up and the seat is already yours." I cried in her bathroom for a few minutes, then came out and we ate dinner. A year passed, and then another. I went to birthdays and ordinary Sundays and holidays that felt nothing like the ones I had grown up inside. Ruth kept a specific chair for me at her table. Even when I was sick and couldn't make it, no one else sat in it. In my old family, my chair disappeared the moment I wasn't in it. Here it waited. I also came to know Daniel, Pete's brother, who worked with wood and spoke carefully and moved through the world with a quiet steadiness that I found I could breathe around. One evening, I started washing his dishes without thinking, out of the old habit of earning my keep, and he gently took the sponge from my hand. He said he wanted my company, not my help. It was the first time I fully understood that those two things could be entirely separate. My biological family did not disappear entirely. They simply revealed what they had always been. Shelby eventually texted me, not to apologize, but to ask if I was still doing taxes for free, because my mother's accountant had gotten too expensive. They didn't miss me. They missed my function. I was like a commercial break they tolerated until the program they actually cared about came back on. I stopped answering. I opened my own accounting practice and put my name on the door. I had earned that name. One Sunday, Ruth gave me a small wooden box that Daniel had made. Inside was the recipe for the wild rice hot dish, written in Ruth's handwriting. She had listened carefully over many dinners as I described the way Grandma Jo made it, and she had reconstructed it from memory, mine and hers together. It wasn't the original box. It wasn't the original cards. But it was something made by people who had been paying attention to what mattered to me, and that made it more valuable than any yard sale find. Ruth told me, not long after that, about adult adoption under Minnesota law. It was a legal process by which she could formally become my mother. I sat with that for a while. I thought about Grandma Jo and what she would have made of it, and I decided she would have approved. She had always been more interested in who showed up than in who was technically supposed to. We went to the courthouse together. The judge asked if I understood that this would sever my legal relationship with my biological parents. I said yes. It took 11 minutes. The same amount of time I had spent sitting on my couch the night of that voicemail, staring at the snow. I came out the other side as Ruth's daughter, with paperwork that said so. Daniel proposed in his wood shop, not with production but with a simple statement that he'd been certain about me every day and wanted to keep being certain. We got married by the river. The wedding program listed Ruth and the memory of Gus as the parents of the bride. My biological parents showed up uninvited. My mother made her way toward me during the reception and announced that they were my real family. That blood was what mattered, that I owed them more than this. I looked at her and spoke very quietly. I told her that she had called me one November and told me not to come because of drama. I had listened, and I had kept listening, and eventually I had found my way to people who wanted me in the room. There was no yelling. There was no scene. They were asked to leave, and they left. I didn't need to raise my voice because the truth was already documented in a courthouse 11 minutes away. I deleted the 41-second voicemail eventually. I had kept it the way an accountant keeps records, out of professional habit, and a sense that evidence matters. But I didn't need it anymore. My life had filled up with people who kept a chair empty when I couldn't make it, who took the sponge out of my hand and told me they wanted my company, who wrote down old recipes from memory because they knew those recipes mattered to me. I spent a long time believing that being useful was the price of being loved, that if I fixed enough things and solved enough problems and made myself indispensable enough, the quiet that followed would feel like belonging. It didn't. Belonging sounds different. It sounds like someone saying, "Come sit with us," and meaning it, and proving it, and still meaning it years later, when there is nothing left for you to fix. If your family ever made you feel like you were the problem simply because you noticed things they needed everyone to ignore, I want you to know that the problem was never you. The people who really love you are not keeping score of what you bring. They already have a seat with your name on it, and they are not giving it away. That is what home actually feels like. It just sometimes takes a wrong turn on a snowy Thanksgiving night to find it.